Take your career to the next level. The University of South Florida, St. Petersburg is offering a master's degree in digital journalism and design. Do the entire program from home and complete it in as little as 1 year. For more information, email journalism@usf.edu or call 727-873-4544. The cost is reasonable. The experience is invaluable. The views and opinions of this episode's guest and the host are not associated with nor reflect those of the University of South Florida. From the worldwide leader in journalism, truth, and democracy, this is the Poynter Report Podcast, a joint production between the Poynter Institute and the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Now here's your host from the Poynter Institute, Tom Jones.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. In this episode, we have a really special guest. I'm really excited to talk to her. She is Karen Attiah, former opinions columnist at the Washington Post. She has had and continues to have an impactful career in journalism. We'll talk to her about that, as well as recent developments. Last month, Karen was fired from her job at the Washington Post following posts on social media in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting. She has filed a grievance against the Post. We're going to get into all that, but first, let me welcome in Karen Attiah. Karen, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
I want to let our audience know that we're recording this on October the 2nd, which is a grim anniversary. It was 7 years ago on this date that journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered by Saudi agents, according to U.S. intelligence, under the orders of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Karen, you were very close with Jamal. You recruited him to the Post. You were his editor. I know you think about him often, I'm sure, but on this day in particular, I wonder if you could share just what your thoughts are when it comes to Jamal.
Yeah, it's it's really something that today is the anniversary, and I still remember the day like it was yesterday. I can't believe it's been 7 years, but I remember being at the Washington Post and seeing and sitting at my desk and seeing pings from friends saying like Jamal's missing. And I remember we had sort of just had like my then colleague Jason Rezaian, who not too long before, as a number of people know, he was imprisoned in Iran for doing journalism. So it was just sort of like this back-to-back kind of like, oh my goodness, doing journalism for the Washington Post is very, very risky business. And of course, a few days later, we got the confirmation that Jamal was indeed dead. And that just really kicked, everything into high gear. And in terms of, for me, I just remember thinking, oh my God, like, this wasn't a journalist who, I only saw via email or, he lived in Virginia. He was telling me he was traveling in Turkey and we were supposed to meet up for lunch to discuss his ideas. And we were just kind of going about our lives as normal people doing our jobs. And then on October 2nd, then Jamal was gone and I basically pounded the pavement, media speaking, to not only demand justice, but I was scared. I mean,
sure.
Jamal, of course, I recruited him to write after he was banned from writing by the Saudi government for a year. So he was already very, very well known in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East. But the idea that, this was someone who had, a million followers, had been in the public eye in the Middle East for a long time, pretty well known in Washington, that they could just kill him like that, eliminate him like that. Yeah. I was like, what does that mean for the rest of us? Right. Fast forward to today, and here I am fighting, being silenced and fired by the very same newspaper that gave Jamal a platform in English and sort of paraded us both around as symbols of press freedom and what it looks like to stand up for journalists. Honestly, Tom, I don't think I've really processed this betrayal, whiplash, I suppose. So
let's go back to the early part of your career at the Washington Post. You started there in 2014. You were the founding editor of the Global's opinion section, and you became a columnist in 2021. And I just found this out recently. I want to check with you. Ironically, you helped set the social media policies at the Post, or at least with the opinion section.
Yeah, actually, so when I was first recruited, I actually had just come off of a stint. I started as an Associated Press stringer, a reporter in Curacao. But even before then, I was pretty active on Twitter, especially, and had like a little following. Myself had a blog, so I was pretty good at Twitter, to the point where I was working with the World Bank, as well, working with a number of companies to help train their people on how to use social media. So it's interesting. I was actually just looking back at all of the old emails from when I was recruited, and a part of my job as a producer and social media person was, I helped build the Post Opinions social media pages on Facebook and on Twitter, like built that. And in the early days, the Post was not quite like the most internet savvy. So they brought in a bunch of us, I think younger folks as producers to sort of help them, I guess, like transition more fully into this social media and digital space. So yeah, for the opinion section, we were obviously a lot smaller at the time. But I was actually helping to train the other columnists in how to use social media, and I helped with putting together just like best practices actually for this section. Yeah, I had to go back and like refresh my memory, and I was like, oh my goodness, the editorial page editor at the time, the late Fred Hyatt, was like, here's Karen Attiah, our social media whiz. So yeah, it's if anything, that's always been that was my job to guide the opinion section at the very beginning, and how to use these mediums effectively to build audiences, to promote their work, and to engage in discourse. So yeah, that was my job, to train these folks on how to use.
So from the time like 2014 up until let's go from like when you started at the Post up until right before the word got out that the Post opinion section or the editorial department was not going to make an endorsement for president in 2024. So from 2014 to early 2024, how would you describe your experience at the Post? I mean, you're winning awards. You seem to have a huge impact. You're starting a section. Not that you're hanging out with Jeff Bezos, but you were seen with Jeff Bezos. I mean, you were at dinners with him, and he seemed to be a great champion in your work. Like, how would you describe that decade of your career at the Post?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it was always easy, obviously, but it was amazing, right? Like I went from, my dream was to, again, my background is mostly in actually international affairs and global development. It's just, I really liked writing, and I really liked sort of informing people and keeping up with the discourse. So for me, a big part of, again, why I was hired actually was because of my background in press freedom issues. So I actually worked with Freedom House. I worked with doing Freedom of the Press report. So that was a big reason why Fred Hyatt, who deeply cared about these issues around the world from his time as an international correspondent, and particularly in authoritarian nations, he deeply cared about that. Not just deeply cared, that was the culture. That was the culture of the opinion section. It wasn't just that we were tasked with, getting our sort of American opinions out. He deeply cared about keeping a lens on the rest of the world and using our platforms for good. Yeah. Like I remember Gosh, I remember we would get visits from, human rights activists from all around the world, right, who would come to Washington to sort of get Washington's attention, get America's attention on situations around the world. And quite often, they come to Washington and they don't always get to meet with senators, lawmakers, with the high profile people. And Fred was always like, well, we try to open our doors, so at least if they come to Washington, they can be heard by someone with power. So very frequently, my time at the Post was a real apprenticeship in human rights and in sort of the art of making people feel heard and doing what we could. Like, I remember we got a visit from folks from Nigeria who were trying to raise awareness for those who were kidnapped by Boko Haram and those who were displaced. This is around the time of Bring Back Our Girls and the kidnapped Chibok girls. And I remember these folks couldn't get, a sort of hearing by official Washington, but they came to us. And I remember Fred said, we listened, to their story, and he looked at me, he was like, all right, get to writing. Let's help these people. And so that for me, it was a honor and a privilege to be able to, and I wore many hats, of course. Like, I would write editorials on Africa, especially. I wrote the first editorial for the Flint water crisis, actually. So I got a chance to really grow as a thinker and as an advocate, even if I disagreed politically with the hows of it all, the whys to do good was still very much ingrained in me. So, and I met a lot of cool people. It was cool. Like, it's cool to be able to ask questions for a living and to you're never bored.
Right.
Like, your days are never the same. So that ethos of really, thinking deeply about the world and thinking deeply about humanity. Like, it sounds so Pollyanna-ish, but it's true. And knowing that we had power, knowing that we had to be careful, I think, or at least that's how I felt. So to fast forward to now, and that same, knowing we had to be careful, but also knowing that sometimes, speaking the truth was going to invite backlash and going to invite discomfort, but at least there was a setup where the institution, the editors, had people's backs. Me as an editor, I was deeply ingrained in me. Like, if I'm publishing you and you're part of the roster, I'm gonna stand behind you as a writer.
Right.
That was my responsibility. So, Jamal, of course, was the worst case scenario, a writer being killed. I had writers who were jailed, one in Rwanda. I had writers that were chased out of their jobs. And of course, you can't control everything. But I think, again, there was an ethos of we have to back people up.
Right.
When they're in trouble. And now to sort of be cast out the way I was is really, I don't know, it's just sad.
Sure. There was clearly a shift within the Post. I mean, at least publicly or from the outside, we saw this shift. First, it started, I guess, with the no endorsement, but then really in February, Jeff Bezos, the owner, by this point, he had gone to Donald Trump's inauguration, and he, or Amazon, donated a lot of money to Trump's inauguration fund. But he sort of came out with this new mission for the Post opinion section, which said they would focus on opinions about defending personal liberties and a free market. And a lot of folks at the Post left at this point, including David Shipley, who was the Post opinions editor. The thing I found interesting about that part, Karen, was I don't know how you felt, but like this idea of like defending personal liberties and free market, I'm not exactly sure what those phrases ultimately mean, but I'm like, who's not for some of that? Like I could see that, but the idea that there would be no opposing viewpoints to that, and because they're going to be published in other places, take us back to that moment. Was there at that moment, did you think, is this place for me anymore? Did you feel like because like I said, David Shipley left, other people were leaving, or did you feel like, nope, I can still make an impact here. I still need to fight the good fight. Was there any moment at that time where you thought, I don't know if I want to be here, or did you feel like, nope, I need to stay and keep doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say I was like, well, anyone at least reading not only my work, but if you consider the bulk of my time actually at the Post has been as an editor. So I've always been for people to be free, right? I mean, personal liberty, to be free to express themselves, to be free to be themselves, and to advocate for, people, no matter their race, color, ethnic origin, religious beliefs, political beliefs, all of that. Like, to me, that's the foundation of personal liberty. So I was like, oh, yeah, to me, I'm like, that's what I've been doing. And then sure, free markets. Okay, free markets of ideas, allow the market to do what it does and comment on that, right? The main question, I guess, for a lot of people was and we will do pretty much nothing else, right? So like, I guess for me, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, the sort of ethos was for everyone was kind of, all right, just keep doing the work, right? And I was like, I'm just going to keep doing the work until I can't. And, I had some pending projects, and I was just like, all right, let me just keep doing this work and get this stuff done until being told otherwise. And now here I am, right? And it definitely was sad to see so many of my former colleagues not just like leave, and not just particularly the veterans, right? The ones you could go to, the ones with the institutional knowledge, the ones who were the mentors, who were the advocates. And this wasn't just the opinion section, of course, that included the newsroom as well. And so particularly obviously for me to see that I was the last remaining Black full-time opinion columnist in Washington, D.C., where 2020 census has the city as 40% Black. I was like, oh my goodness, this is really a profound and honestly like historic, like the word I want to say is purge of Black journalists, especially at this juncture. So what can I say? I mean, it's still, I guess the way I think about it is like, I haven't changed. I never changed my journalistic values or the training or, as Jeff Bezos publicly put it, that we were supposed to be swashbucklers. He wanted us to be swash. He told us that to our faces at meetings and to be provocative and as well as under Fred Hyde being thoughtful and being allowing again for this wide range of people to have the personal liberty to express themselves. Right. So to see that, about face it's stunning. I'm still shocked.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into the details of what's happened over the last month. Hey, everybody, if you like this podcast, can I ask you a favor? I'd love to make sure you also subscribe to the Poynter Report newsletter, where I bring you the latest news and commentary about the media industry every weekday. If you're already signed up, thanks a lot. But you should also check out some of the other great newsletters we have at poynter.org/newsletters. My colleague, Kristen Hare, focuses on the local news scene in communities all across the country every Wednesday with Local Edition. My editor, Ren LaForme, gives you the roundup of the best media stories from Poynter every Friday in his Open Tabs newsletter. And if you care about misinformation, fact-checking, getting to the truth, the Factually newsletter has you covered. And if you're looking for some great ways to improve your skills in writing, leadership, or ethics, our weekly training digest has you covered. Just go to poynter.org/newsletters and sign up today. So, okay, we now arrive at a few weeks ago and the shooting death of right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk. And Karen, I'm going to let you take over this part. I'll let you describe in your words what happened, because I'm not sure the media coverage, and we can get into the media coverage in a bit, accurately portrayed exactly what happened. So I'll let you just go ahead and describe. Charlie Kirk is shot. You eventually go to Blue Sky, and then what happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I actually was not in DC. I was in Dallas dealing with family health issues. So I was I was on social media and I was seeing these reports coming in of Charlie Kirk having been shot in Utah at a university event. And almost immediately I saw the graphic videos at first of him being shot in the neck, which was shocking, obviously. And then seeing, the speculation, was he alive or dead? And immediately in my sort of training and instinct, I was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be a major, major news story. And then, oh my goodness, okay, this is not the time to sort of speculate or get ahead of like whatever the reported facts are. There are all sorts of, people wondering whether he was alive or dead, and even Trump himself, right? Like, right. Weighing in, and I was like, all right, well, we need to hear from like someone official, like whether or not Kirk has passed away. That being said, there was also another shooting that day, the shooting of school children in Colorado. So for me, literally at the same time. So for me, I was thinking about both shootings on September 10th, and still fresh in my mind was the fact that the CDC, the Center for Disease Control building, got shot up hundreds of times, and a police officer had been killed. Then, of course, like the brutal assassinations of Melissa Hortman, her husband, their dog in Minnesota. So already with the Charlie Kirk shooting and what happened in Colorado, there was a lot of this rhetoric, right, that is predictable. The sort of, this is not who we are, thoughts and prayers, political violence has no place here. And so my first kind of thoughts were, again, especially because the details in the Kirk shooting were still fluid, was just a comment about America overall, right? I mean, it's like, of course, the murder was wrong. Political violence shouldn't have a place here in a functioning society, but it does. And this empty rhetoric isn't going to fix this, right? And my posts were just basically lamenting the combination of the empty rhetoric and the inaction on guns, the inaction on, how do we get out of this embrace, worship even, I would say, of gun violence. So again, nothing particularly revolutionary to me, but just like general sadness and frustration at the state of America. So my post specifically, and again, keep in mind, I'm an opinion journalist, and an opinion journalist focused on race, gender, and culture. Part of my job, explicitly, is to comment on these things. And I saw, two things, again, in the service of journalistic restraint. I saw people speculating as to the shooter, as to the motives of the shooter, and I actually said, hey guys, including the president himself, who was already blaming leftists and all of that. I was like, we don't know who the shooter is, and we don't know anything about the motives. But the rhetoric was already, inflamed. So again, like, sort of journalistic responsibility is to like remind everyone on both sides that like, hey, we actually do not have solid facts quite yet. Which is why, on commenting about political violence in America and political violence having no place here, I sent a post saying political violence shouldn't have a place here, but we saw the shootings of the lawmakers in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman, And America shrugged, more or less, and moved on. We were shocked for a bit, and then we sort of moved on. And then under that post, I said part of what keeps America so violent is the, performing this empty care and this goodness and this absolution for white men, specifically who espouse hatred and violence. So that was actually in reference, or right under the Melissa Hortman, my commentary on the Minnesota shootings, because in that case, that was a white male shooter, as documented pretty extensively by the FBI and by the DOJ and by numerous, experts on mass shootings and right-wing violence. The sad reality, unfortunate reality, is that young white male are more likely to be the perpetrators of this sort of violence. So mass shootings and political right-wing violent extremism, right? So those are just facts that everybody knows and that it's easily backed up. So posted that, no pushback. And then the second part was there was a lot of already pushing and pulling over Kirk's legacy, his words, his particularly his views on race, right? And so on one side you had people, actively celebrating his death, or at the very least being pretty callous about it. And then on the other extreme, you had people who were not only mourning but demanding revenge, and I just saw both extremes. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? Or and I said, someone accused me of not saying, I guess, enough about Kirk himself, or sort of they were saying I was all violence matters. Kirk specific death. Basically, they were saying that I wasn't saying or doing enough for Kirk because I was bringing up these other instances of political violence and saying political violence is a fact and a feature of our society. And that's when I had the post. So refusing to performatively tear my clothes and smear ashes on my face. In my mind, I was thinking of the ancient Greeks, right? The performance of mourning. I was not doing that, or refusing to do that is not the same as condoning violence. It is not a violent act to say I'm not going to engage in hysteric mourning, right? The over the top mourning, the performative. If it's real, I mean, my grief over America and over what Charlie Kirk's murder was going to mean for all of us, that was real. I was resigned to, my gosh, this is going to be a watershed moment, and that's all in my posts that are still up. But yeah, I said that, and those are just facts. Refusing to performatively over the top, more particularly for someone who routinely disparaged, Black women, who said the Civil Rights Act was a mistake, who said George Floyd was scum, who commented on the brain processing power of Michelle Obama and, prominent Black women figures. I'm like, it would be irresponsible of me and fake of me to engage in over-the-top performative mourning for someone like that. That's just facts, right?
Look, you've been around a long time. You've posted a lot of things over the course of your career, and you've written a lot of things over the course of your career. When you sent those out, was there any thought in your mind somebody's going to get upset? Or did you think I can't imagine people are going to be riled up about this?
No, because that was the only reference I had to Kirk himself. My postings were very general, and very specific to, white men who commit and espouse hatred and violence. I personally think that someone who puts academics on watch lists that end up, with them receiving death threats and being doxxed, as some of my own acquaintances have been due to Charlie Kirk. I personally don't think that that's a peaceful act. I think that is a pretty violent thing to do, right? And that is my opinion. And as an opinion writer, I am allowed to espouse that, like, again, grounded in reasonable facts. Like, so yeah, I went on about my day, and I know what it's like when people are uncomfortable or upset with something I've said and there's pushback. There was none of that. And so then the next day, I see a missed call from a Washington Post number. I couldn't get to it in time. I actually had just finished training Muay Thai, so my phone was in the bottom of my bag and under my gloves and stuff, and I couldn't reach it in time. And then maybe a couple minutes later, I see this email come across my phone with the subject line, "Notice of termination." And that was it. Like, that was and then I see the termination letter, and the first few lines were, this is to put you on notice that your termination is effective immediately. I was accused of gross misconduct. My recent Blue Sky post, and it was, and it said that I, quote, possibly endangered the safety of the physical safety of my colleagues.
I thought that was a lot to put on you, that particular line, I mean,
yeah, with no evidence and and again, this was with no conversation. The letter.
Do you know who the call came from that you missed?
Not exactly. No, I mean, well, actually, that's not true. That came from the head of HR, so not even like my direct bosses.
See, this is the thing that I'm sort of flabbergasted by. You're really, from all accounts, a really good employee for 10 years. You've done amazing things at the Washington Post. I mean, were you you would think that somebody would call you and say, "Hey, Karen, we have an issue with one of your social media posts. Can we talk about this? Can you explain it?" There was none of that. Like, nobody said, it was just, "You're gone"?
Correct. It was just, "You're gone," and gross misconduct, and very specifically that my references of white men was the offending issue, that this social media policy prevents disparaging on the basis of protected characteristics, such as race and gender, and in the aftermath of the Kirk shooting, that this was disrespectful in the aftermath of the Kirk shooting. So very specifically, it was the posts that they referenced were the ones about overly performative mourning for Charlie Kirk refusing to do that was one of the examples they gave, and the other was part of what keeps America so violent is performing empty care, goodness, absolution for white men who espouse hatred and violence. So apparently, I still am flabbergasted by the logic. Anyone can go back and read the posts and see that I didn't say all white men. I didn't say some white men. I didn't say percent. I very, very specifically narrowed this down to violent white men and those who espouse hatred. Whether the post is arguing that those are protected characteristics, I mean, in some ways proves my point, right? But that's the, again, like, my job. I was doing my job, and I've commented on race and gender and written about it, paid to do it, paid to make this commentary about culture, and the idea that as a Black female journalist, that what if they expected me to strip down naked in the streets for mourning over Kirk? Is that the implication? Would I have kept my job if I had said the opposite, which is, I will now tear my clothes and smear ashes on my face, right? I mean, it's really, and it's not just me. It sets a chilling precedent for all journalists who cover these sorts of issues, right? Who cover violence, who cover domestic terrorism, who cover race. are we not allowed now to talk about white men? Because I talk about race, I've talked about, all sorts of various groups and patterns. And so it's this idea again that I was disparaging when I was just being descriptive based on the facts, based on the patterns, and based on actually what happened in real life. Once the alleged shooter in Charlie Kirk's murder was Tyler Robinson, a young white male from Utah, who a few days later, when his identity was revealed, we have figures like Nancy Grace who are like, oh, we need to pray for him, right? Which is literally the definition of absolution, absolving, and Kirk's widow at the funeral saying, I forgive him. It's literally the definition of absolution, right? So it's not just what I said was controversial, it was prescient, because that's exactly what happened, right?
You posted the letter on your Substack page, the Golden Hour, by the way, for those who want to check it out. But you can read the termination letter that the Post sent you. There was a reference, I think, low in the letter about something about documented performance concerns of the past. What was that in reference to?
I would love to see what they produced in my 11 years as far as formal documented discipline. I've not had that. So, but all these things, as you said, I'll have a time and a place to settle all of this. And we're, asking them again to, produce evidence. But yeah, as I said, I mean, I, as an opinion columnist, have been given a wide berth to express our opinions, particularly in breaking news situations where, we have to exercise restraint. And I did all those things. And I did everything I was supposed to do. So again, to be terminated in a way that, breaks our contract. I'm a guild member, right? So breaks our collective bargaining agreement and, just breaks policy and just sets a really chilling precedent for the rest of the journalists who remain at the Post, as well as for, opinion journalists is just really chilling. But there's a process underway, and I expect, there'll be a time and a place and a more robust forum for this to be challenged and sorted out.
Have you had any sense on who made the call on this? I mean, did it go as high as Bezos? Was it Adam O'Neill, who's the new opinions editor? And I guess as a part two to that question, like when Kimmel got suspended, there was sort of this like snowball effect where he made his comments in his monologue, and nothing really happened until Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, went on a podcast, and then all of a sudden there was this huge pushback. So with your social media posts, it didn't seem like there was an immediate pushback from anybody, and then all of a sudden you're terminated. So like how did it get there, and then who do you think ultimately made the call on it?
Yeah, well, I hope to find out. All I can say is, that, like you said, the termination letter and my account of things is public. It's unusual, obviously, to not have had any sort of calls from direct managers. But yeah, all these things are what the guild and my legal team hope to get to the bottom of.
Have you heard from any of your colleagues at the Post?
I've had a lot of support from guild colleagues. Gotten messages from a number of my current and former employees. Those because working in a place for 11 years. I mean, spending just so much time. And I was, I was pretty young as well. So it's like very kind of professional formative years. So I've gotten a lot of support. I have been a bit, one thing I was not sort of counting on in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shooting was it had been hard to get on like mainstream broadcast TV networks, actually, to get a one-on-one. My first sort of one-on-one was with Don Lemon and on his independent channel. And that aspect of the chilling effect, I suppose, of in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk shootings, in the immediate aftermath. I mean, seeing people getting doxxed. I know my firing came a few days after Matthew Dowd, I think, was fired, or at least simultaneously. Matthew Dowd fired from MSNBC for, I think very balanced, if not like balanced comments on Charlie Kirk. So I'm not the only one, perhaps one of the more high profile ones, and obviously not reinstated like Jimmy Kimmel was. But yeah, it's been really interesting to see how it's been the podcasters, the Substackers, the YouTubers, who have been like, okay, let's sit down and really like talk all of this out. And so it really makes me think about, okay, just in general, like the future of mainstream media, if there is one, for linear TV, and again, even just this story of sort of me posting on Substack myself, and then that traveling through social media, and then that like driving the news cycle on this, just also makes me think, okay, we're in a very different era. Where do the journalists go who really want to be able to speak truth to power? And I've been joking, I'm like, man, is Substack the new public broadcaster, right? I mean, we're sitting here with a government shutdown, and PBS and NPR are posting on social media how this will be the first time they're operating without, federal funding. And we've seen the attacks on networks. Donald Trump still threatening to sue ABC over Jimmy Kimmel. He has, settled with CBS, huge lawsuits and things like that. Seeing the FCC, yes, get involved in Jimmy Kimmel's situation. I mean, it feels like sitting here that this is a broader assault on the media, and between that and the purging of particularly journalists of color, particularly like Black journalists, it's almost like we're having to seek refuge in these new spaces. It's just wild that, part of my job was to build a journalistic refugee home for writers around the world who weren't able to publish in their home countries. That got destroyed or dismantled. And now here I am trying to find my own journalistic refuge on the internet. And I'm not the only one. Again, I mean, sitting with folks like Don Lemon, who had his show canceled on CNN, Jim Acosta, Joy Reid, Tiffany, who was of MSNBC, Tiffany Cross, Mehdi Hassan was of MSNBC. So it's like this kind of, we're part of this club now of mainstreamers who are now having to work on the fringes, and with like success. I've been really heartened by a lot of the support, and like I said, it feels like coming out of like wait, this new world, is this possible? Like what is but I think
why do you think the mainstream media hasn't jumped on this story as hard as it should? And is there anything that we're missing here that we need to? Is there any part of this story that we, those of us who are talking about, are missing about this story, or focusing on the wrong thing?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. There's a parade of horrors in the news between ICE and between the attacks on other institutions. It was pretty easy to miss some of the warning signs, particularly when it came to media, right? Particularly the announcement that even at WAPO that certain opinions were not going to be allowed, basically. Or even just, I think months ago, I posted like, hey, I'm the last Black staff columnist left. And that raised some alarms, but probably not nearly enough. I mean, I think we're in a climate, and this is to zoom out of WAPO and even me and even Charlie Kirk. And even America, well, I'll start with America. We're in a climate where there have been increasing attacks on the press, where Trump especially has labeled the press, the enemy of the people, fake news, all of that. I would also say, in terms of punishment for free speech, we saw campus protesters, even under the Biden administration, get stripped of their rights to be able to protest what's happening over in Israel and Palestine. Seeing people deported or threatened with deportation over writing op-eds critical, of Israel. Right. So I think also for me, I take all of this in totality with a sort of darkening climate. Again, attacks on race, starting all the way with the Civil Rights Act. But I think in recent memory, even for me as a reporter, starting with the attacks on critical race theory in the local school board levels, and the censoring going on in the schools, and then that morphing into DEI as a boogeyman. Right. And now we're seeing this active purge, using any weapon like they can find, really, like whether it's DEI, whether it's anti-Semitism, whether it's Charlie Kirk, frankly, I think is a weaponized purge tool. The ultimate goal is this really chilling, we need to purify our institutions. And regardless of whether it's legal or not, or the optics they don't care about anymore. So I don't know if it's so much that people are missing because there's so much going on, but it's rather like connecting all of these dots. And anyone who's studied history, particularly in not even other totalitarian countries, this country has a history of this, as well, that this is a very dark path. And this is a path where, combined with the, we're looking at the possible takeover of TikTok by, the Ellisons. We're looking at Musk having taken over X and driving out a number of voices like mine. We're looking at this global, Jared Kushner's investment firm, along with the Saudi private investment fund, looking to take over Electronic Arts, which is responsible for very popular video game titles. So we're seeing this wholesale takeover of our digital media environment, backed by a lot of money. And I worry about the complete asymmetry of resources and power. Like, what happens when your media, your social media, your video games, everything that helps people connect with one another and make sense of the world and construct actual reality is being completely monopolized, right? What can I say? It feels like a very dark path that I don't really know what the answer is. But this is a culmination of policy choices, of media monopoly, of so much power in the hands of so few men. Mostly, right wing and around the world, and this is global, right? So, it's a scary time, but it's also, this is where the values mean more than ever, right? And this is where, at least for me, like I keep saying, my values haven't changed. Again, we're sitting here on the anniversary of Jamal's murder, and I keep thinking about how, in so many ways, he was a canary in the coal mine for what we're facing now, where people can be silenced for any reason by powerful people. And I always tried to make that case that Jamal was like what happened to Jamal could happen to any one of us if we're increasingly abandoning sort of democracy and calling people who disagree with us enemies that need to be eliminated. That's not just for other countries. It's happening right here and right now. So I don't know if people are missing things, if it's more so that if you haven't woken up, it's time to really wake up and pay attention. And that
let me ask you one final question, Karen. Obviously you're let go at the Post. I imagine you were confused and angry, but is there ever a moment of like just sadness? Like, not only was this a place where you talked a moment ago about working there and sort of growing up there, but this is the Washington Post, man. This is a place that like always was a champion of freedom of expression and diversity of viewpoints and freedom of speech. Like, is there ever a moment like this is just, I feel sad?
Yeah, you're the first one who asked me that. Yeah, I think, and I've been so kind of in crisis mode or the adrenaline of it all that I haven't really, I don't know if I've really sat down and processed the grief of it all. I still have in my apartment the last piece I edited by Jamal after he was murdered. And I keep thinking about editing that piece and how that was like putting together this final goodbye by Jamal. And his last piece called for freedom of expression. That what the world needs is for people to be able to speak up, and that he had these dreams. He specifically said he had the dreams that the Washington Post could be a beacon and an example for hope for people to be heard. That's what he wanted. He wanted to create his own kind of empire at the Post in a way. And he really believed not only in the Post, but in the Post as a proxy for American democracy and for, I think, American democracy as a proxy for what it could look like for a world where people are free. And so I think about that now. I think about his hope and his idealism and my hope and my idealism and coming, I guess it makes me sad to think that, I put my life on the line quite often for this, for the Post, for standing up for my writers. I know people say you shouldn't love companies. It's just a job. It's just there's just institutions and all of that. But I think as a journalist, there's something for a lot of us that's higher than that, right? We really accept a lot of crap because we deeply believe in wanting to be able to think and process about the world and keep people informed and keep people safe. And help other people. And it just makes me sad to see institutions abandoning that at a time when there are a lot of people, when people's lives are perhaps more profoundly on the line than they have been in a long time. And then, speaking of obituaries, the fact that, I had to, have my profile at the Washington Post where it describes, who the staffer is, and to, just like that, to go from 11 years to see like my bio say Karen Attiah is a columnist to was a columnist. Yeah. And it's like reading my own obituary in real time. And, not even, in the other stories about censorship and Jimmy Kimmel in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk shooting, I'm not mentioned as if I wasn't ever there. Right. So it's really sad, but that's not a reflection of my work. I'm proud of the work that I've done. Like they can't take that away from me. And I know many people around the world know, the work that I've done and tried to do. So to that extent, I don't let what has happened in this phase of whatever the post is choosing to become define me or define what I think journalism is and should be. So I think a lot of people see that. So I'm comforted by a lot of the support. But yeah, I definitely, it'll hit me at some point, it's just to be like, oh my goodness. Yeah, now what?
What? So people can find you on Substack now? That's where to go for now?
Yeah, so people can find me on Substack. So my Substack is called The Golden Hour. Stay tuned for more potential announcements. So Substack, and then I also was teaching race and media at Columbia University for a time at the School of International and Public Affairs, and the funding for that class was canceled. So I've had a lot of roadblocks, but I am going to be teaching this class to the masses anyway. So there's still time to sign up, a few days, but anyone who wants to sign up to learn Race, Media, and International Affairs 101 with me, you can find that at Resistance Study Series. So I'm basically launching my own kind of, I keep joking, I'm in my rogue radical professor era now. So just in a time when teaching about race, and clearly, as Washington Post is sadly demonstrating, even speaking about race is considered taboo and intellectual contraband. I'm like, this is actually now more than ever the time that we need to be teaching about these things, talking about these things, having these honest conversations and interrogating them. So if anything, like all these setbacks just tell me and tell everyone like, all right, well, we're going to keep doing this anyway and building community anyway. So it's been such a great experience. We had 540 students in my first run of the class over the summer. We have about the same, about 500 or so students signed up to take this online. So with amazing guest speakers, and we're giving scholarships and things like that. So that's my new platform to be a writer and an educator.
Well, Karen Attiah, thank you so much. Good luck to you. Thanks for sharing your story, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, so much.
Thanks to everybody for listening and watching. Be sure to check out recent episodes, including our last episode, an interesting conversation with Chuck Todd. If you like what you see and you hear here, give us a like, give us a good review, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Poynter. And thanks again. Talk to you again soon on the Poynter Report Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Poynter Report Podcast. The views and opinions of this episode's guest and the host are not associated with nor reflect those of the University of South Florida. The podcast is produced by the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Executive producers are Elliot Weiser and Ren LaForme. Our producers are Tom Jones and Caden Knowles. Production assistant is Ariel Menkes, and our director is Christopher Campbell. And a special thank you to Neil Brown and Dr. Mark Walters.